Hello, all, and welcome back to TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season, we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we are back with The Bear, and we're reviewing The Bear Season 3. Today, we are starting our journey on episode 1, titled Tomorrow. If you haven't watched this episode yet, this is your spoiler alert. Please check it out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. All right. Sarah, how excited are you that we're back with our Bear fam?
I'm so excited. Oh my goodness. I was ready to be back in the kitchen with Carmy and Sydney and everybody. It's so weird, but after watching so much of this show, you feel like they're your friends. And so it's just fun to spend time with your friends again.
Yeah, I had that same feeling when this episode started and we see some of our characters on screen again. It's just like, oh my gosh, we're back. What have you been up to? How are things? Last we left you off, there was a lot happening and we're excited to see where they're at now. I think also especially because you and I, we've, for TV and Us, reviewed season 1 and season 2. So it really feels like we've been on this several month journey, really like getting to know and hanging out with these people. So I think that also is extra special as we've been gearing up for season 3. So the moment has come. We are here with the premiere of season 3. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Here we go. So in TV and Us tradition, we will start off with our episode title. So this is what we would name this episode if we had a choice. Sarah, what is your episode title for season 3, episode 1 of The Bear?
My title is Subtract.
Nice. Oh, yeah. Fitting for the vibe of this episode as well. There's a lot of things that we're soaking in with Carmy in this episode, and that was a moment. All right, my episode title is All Nighter.
Yep. Yeah, you're not wrong. There's a few of those in this episode.
Many of those. Yep. All right, so let's dive in. The spoiler was given earlier, so we're diving right in, and we're going to be able to talk about all of the different parts of this episode in its entirety. So, Sarah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about episode 1. This is kind of the beginning of a new season, this new phase or chapter with our characters, and I feel like the premiere of a new season always sets the vibe, sets the tone for all of these storylines and thread lines for our characters. So I'm curious your thoughts on this premiere of season 3.
Yeah, this episode is very different from what we've grown accustomed to in The Bear, but it still feels like it's part of a cohesive whole, which I think is very interesting. And the way that this episode is able to kind of recap us on where everybody's at, because I mean, for a lot of people, they watched season 2 a year ago. So I feel like this is a good reset, recap. Hey, remember, this is what happened. These are some of the things that these characters are dealing with. This is where we're at, while also giving us new information about Carmy and his past and kind of setting a different tone for this season. And we've seen, you know, in the first season, it was the sandwich shop and it was the beef and kind of like a rundown sandwich shop and just trying to survive. In the second season, it was like building this restaurant. And then this third season is going to be very different as they're trying to execute in this fine dining world. And so I think it's so smart to use this episode that incorporates parts of the past 2 seasons, but does it in a different tone to maybe set us up for some different environments and different experiences that these characters that we know and love are maybe going to encounter in this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is such a different start to the season, like you mentioned, that we've had compared to seasons 1 and season 2. I feel like both of those, we hit the ground running right from episode 1. There's a feeling of momentum and group dynamics, and there was a sense of purpose in some direction. And I feel like this is a much slower, more somber start to the season, which is just fascinating for me to think about. Where are we going to go from here? In a lot of ways, this episode feels so character focused for Carmy specifically. We actually don't see the group together and them interacting and colliding with each other's the way that we have at the start of season one and season two. It's so focused on this inner state, this sense of uh, a mental state that Carmy's in. And it's not focused on some external mission or goal or even group dynamics. It's so internal to where Carmy's at right now. And I think that choice is really interesting to me. I kept waiting to see if the episode would kind of be broken up into chunks where maybe we have this opening where we're really focused on Carmy and where he's at right now, and then maybe towards the second half we get the group together again for something the next day, whatever it is, and we never get that. And I think that is such a fascinating choice and really sets a different tone and a different shift in the start of this season that was surprising for me. There's a lot of flashbacks, which, as you mentioned, is very strategic for grounding us in everything that this team and these characters have been through. But I think they also really help us stay connected to everything that happens externally in the world for these characters is tied to their internal sense of self, where their desires for control or anxiety come from, the stresses that they've experienced in the past, like the we've always talked about with the bear being so character focused, that is the heartbeat for the show. And so it seemed like such a intentional choice for this episode to center solely on Carmy and really ground us in his internal state of being. So I was surprised at how introspective this premiere of this season was, because I think we've gotten something different from season one and season two.
Yeah, I was also really surprised. It was, which it probably says a lot about me, but I was a little stressed at how like peaceful it was. I was like, okay, this episode is kind of slow, kind of peaceful. When is everything going to go wrong? So like I found myself almost like bracing for impact,
Mm.
which I don't know, says more about me than the show. But I thought that it was so smart to have this moment when it's just primarily Carmy alone, and you're seeing, like you said, like his internal state of being, and you see these really formative moments for him, and you see the chaos in his family life, you see those moments with Sugar and kind of like the care that she extends to him, you see all of these different chefs. And we've seen the mean chef, Joel McHale's character, before. We've seen Olivia Colman's character before. But then this episode introduces a couple of other chefs too that were both really instrumental to Carmy and his formation as a chef. And you get to see a little bit more of his journey, even with Mikey, and how that relationship went too. So I found it fascinating that as he is reeling from the events of the previous episode, he is flashing back to all of these things, and they're also interconnected in his mind. And I thought that that was just a really beautiful way to show that these things don't happen in isolation, but they are all connected and help to form him and form his style of leadership and his sensibilities in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's also fascinating to see how much his sense of self, his sense of self esteem really is tied to this desire for control and excellence. And I think it's cool because we've been on this 2 season journey so far with Carmy. And so we've experienced with him some of those flashback moments and understanding of his childhood. That Christmas family episode is so was so powerful at the time, but I feel like the show is continuing to showcase how those moments and that environment really shapes how Carmy finds a sense of ease and how he manages his anxiety and his fears with wondering who he is, his sense of purpose. Like they're all so deeply tied to like those roots. And then we've seen how he's expressed or operated out of those moments of trauma in really unhealthy ways. And it's neat because the final scene or shot of this episode is him creating a entirely new menu at like 4 in the morning after they just created a menu and had friends and family night. And so you see that he's now tapping into those unhealthy states of dealing with stressors in his life and kind of reeling from this pivotal shift that had happened to him at the end of the previous season. So in a lot of ways, like we're starting real low. We've really regressed with Carmy back to operating out of those unhealthy states, those unhealthy senses of self. And I'm excited to see this journey through season 3 of him potentially learning where he can better operate in a healthy way. There was such progress that we saw in him in season 2 of him learning to let himself love and be loved, of finding a healthier relationship with his work. And it's almost like that two steps forward, one step back, two steps forward, one step back for him. And that's so true to how we grow as humans. We kind of are like flailing on both sides of this line until we find healthier balance in all of these areas of our life. And I feel like we've swung to the other side with Carmy of seeing him regress in a lot of ways. But that just means it's only up from here, right? Like we can't go back too much farther, hopefully. So it'll be fascinating to see that we're starting this journey here. So we've got a whole season ahead of us. So the hopefulness is there for me of if we can see Carby really grow because he's starting so low.
And I think that conversation that he has with Sydney is really interesting because Carmy remarks, like, you made it. And Sydney's response is, with everyone else. And in that conversation, Carmy seems so focused on himself. And you just see Sid's face is kind of like, what are you doing? Like the way that they are approaching what happened the previous night is very, very differently. And you can tell that Carmy is not in a good place and kind of can't escape out of that, which is in some ways exactly where he was at the end of season 2. And so, like you, I am very interested to see how Carmy handles this. You know, he has that conversation with Sid where they, I guess, like mend things to a degree, and then obviously calls Richie to apologize. But that's really all the interaction that you see between Carmy and someone else in real time. And I found that really interesting. Like, how is the rest of the group going to respond to him? Because they all together pulled off this incredible feat that I mean, it's very impressive what they were able to do and how they were able to rally and overcome. And so how are they going to respond to Carmy? But then also, how is Carmy going to respond to them? Because I could see if they're gracious to him and welcoming to him, he will probably beat himself up further. So we have many, many opportunities for Carmy to grow in this season. And like you said, really, you can only go up from here. So I'm
Yeah.
rooting for him.
Yeah. We are rooting for him, and it's in. I had a thought where I was like, okay, if we're starting the season here, really, we can only grow. So this is very good. I'm glad this moment is happening now, episode 1, and then we figure out where our journey takes us from here. Um, I think it's very similar in a lot of ways. We've often talked about this like differing trajectories, but also like how both Carmy and Richie help each other, but they're often in different places. And it's interesting to think back to the premiere of season 2 where Richie's at a really low state. You know, like he is questioning his purpose. He is throwing temper tantrums and really reckoning with his sense of self and who he is. And it's neat to see now that Richie has gone through that journey, how and Carmi's at this low, like how will their relationship also mend, and how will they help each other continue to grow? And you know, I don't, you experience this with your friends and close ones sometimes, of like, sometimes it's really great when we're all not having like a entire life crisis at the same time, because there can be that encouragement, there can be that support system. And so it's neat to see how Richie will also react to Carmi's apology. I kind of love that in this episode we don't really know. We see him listening and hearing Carmi's voicemail, but as far as how he feels about it, we kind of just cut away from that moment. And so it really creates this curiosity and a series of questions that we'll hopefully see in the next episode. So I thought that was really like smart storytelling too, of giving us this like feeling of like, okay, we're starting to reconcile with these two core characters of the show, but stay tuned for the next episode to figure out how that actually shakes out fully. So I thought that was really smart.
Yeah, and I love that we also get to see in the flashbacks Olivia Colman's character and how she kind of runs her kitchen. And you see those moments when Carmy kind of starts to spiral and he's like, pick it up, chef, let's go, chef. Like, and the intensity is starting to rise, and her ability to kind of calm him down. And so I kept thinking, because she and Richie have that moment in
Mm.
season 2, I wonder if maybe Richie is going to be able to play maybe some of that role in season 3. Obviously, he has a very different personality, but I do wonder if he will be able to help Carmy in some ways to break out of that cycle, because Richie also knows what it's like to spiral. And so is he going to be able to dig into that empathy and help his cousin walk through this too? So that's just
Mm-hmm.
something else that I'm kind of curious about, or looking forward to.
That's really interesting. Yeah, the way that like Richie can bring out these other sides of Carmy or encourage him in a very specific way that only Richie can. And then like similarly, there's a lot of similarities that I was feeling or kind of experiencing watching Carmy go through this journey in this episode that are very similar to Sydney. And I feel like those two are wired so similarly in a lot of ways where they can really understand each other, but you can also see that perhaps because they're so similar, they might spur each other on into their like workaholic selves and striving for excellence to the point of like exhausting themselves, exhausting their bodies. We saw at the end of season 2 that Sydney like was stressed to the point where she threw up at the end of Friends and Family Night, and she's got that same like tunnel vision drive that Carmy also has. She also has a episode in season 2 where she works like all night to create the menu, and Carmy works all night to create a menu. And they're both so visual, and they both were like drawing and imagining their dishes, so their brains work very similarly. And it's neat to see the way that the show expresses that through these like little moments of seeing them operate in their craft. So it'll be fascinating to see how those two can help each other in a really healthy way, and maybe call each other out in a really healthy way because they understand each other so deeply and how they're wired. But then also on the flip side, if they're both operating in healthy states, you can see how they would fuel each other's like obsessive, ambitious, tunnel vision nature of striving for excellence to the point of their health, their relationships. All of it is collateral damage. So it'll be fascinating to see how those two also continue to interact with each other as they strive for uh, making this restaurant great and earning that star together.
Yeah, when Carmy creates this whole other menu, the whole time I was just going like, "Oh my gosh, how upset are Sydney and Sugar going to be?" Because like now you
Yes.
have to have all new ingredients delivered. Like you have to like completely change a bunch of like back of house stuff, all of the paperwork stuff, all because he had inspiration in the middle of the night and came up with a whole new menu, which I'm sure is wonderful. But I put my project manager hat on and I was like, Carmy, what are you doing? This is not how we process. Don't throw out the menu.
Oh, especially after they just nailed it, literally
Right?
the night beforehand. There's this like in the moment at the end there where he's like hunched over the kitchen island, and he's like staring at his like 7 dishes that he's made. I feel like you also, maybe this is just me projecting, but I feel like you also sense him being like, what have I done? Like, what just happened? I feel like I like blacked out and like was in the zone, and now I've come up for air and I'm staring at all these things that I just created, and it's now 3 a.m. Like, what just happened? Because I can be that way when you get into the flow state and like the ideas are coming and you just, you feel like you have to get it done now. But when you do, you're kind of like, okay, like now it's the wee hours of the night and here we are. What just happened? So I think that it'll be fascinating to see the way that Carmy can recognize those tendencies in himself and maybe not change the whole menu right after we've nailed it the previous night. Maybe that would be good.
Yeah, yeah, just a suggestion, no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's an interesting uh, comparison with Sydney, because on her episode in season 2, she's out and she's sampling food at all of these different restaurants around
Mm.
Chicago. She's talking with other chefs. She's collaborating in other kitchens. Like, it's a very collaborative menu, the way that she's working. She's pulling on like her past and it's very personal to her, but she's not doing it in isolation. And I think, while both characters share a lot of similarities, I think that's one of the differences, is that
Mm.
Sydney is drawn to people where Carmy isolates. And I think that's a
That's so
really
good.
clear contrast between their 2 episodes, where he is creating this whole menu by himself. And sure, he's drawing on other experiences. He's learning from these chefs in his past, but he's not working on it with anybody else like Sydney was. And I think that is one of those examples where they have differences in their personality, and Sydney can maybe help him to draw closer to community rather than isolating, which is his tendency. So that's another thing that I'm just kind of watching out for, is okay, on his journey of growth, hopefully it's a journey of growth, how does he learn to lean into community instead of isolating?
That's so good. That's a fabulous point. Yeah, I love that. I love that because she also is, up late in the kitchen churning out these dishes and dissatisfied with it. She's striving for excellence, but it looks so different from Carmi's style and perhaps a little bit healthier than to isolate yourself and cut yourself off from community to the point where people can't speak into your life anymore, and I feel like you see Carmi's tendency to do that. Um, that's really fascinating. I love that observation. Can we talk about Carmi's cut hand? I did you have
Yes.
thoughts about that? Because I've thought it was maybe something that I had forgotten from the finale of season 2, of him like banging on the door or in the fridge. But I was like, I don't remember there being like such a large gash. So I'm like, is this my memory or is this something that like we are going to get the gaps filled in the next episodes? I'm curious your thoughts on that because they cut to it at least 3 times in this episode and it felt notable.
Yeah, I think I just assumed that he got it in the freezer,
Okay.
but I don't know, I could be wrong.
Mm,
I think it was one of those things where, like, I was like, okay, yeah, show, I get that you're trying to get me to focus on this, but I don't super care. So I'm just going to keep moving on. Like, I've made a note and we can just keep moving on. It didn't create any like lingering questions in me about how he hurt his
mm,
hand. Especially like,
okay.
you work in a
Got it. Got it.
kitchen, you're going to get hurt. Like, it happens.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Other big things that stood out to you?
I really appreciate how kind of all of the components in this episode really helped us to see how Carmy's brain works. And I think that there's moments in the beginning when the cinematography is very fluid, and you're seeing when he's almost in this like serene, like meditative state in the kitchen, and the way that the the images transition, like you can see how all of these ingredients are connected to each other, and it's very fluid and very relaxing and kind of meditative. And then once he's kind of in the thick of the episode and he's remembering some negative thoughts, then it's these really quick cuts between, you know, moments from the fishes episode, which was so traumatic, or moments with Joel McHale's really negative chef. And it's these like quick, hard cuts between things, and there's this momentum and pace as he's kind of spiraling and in this negative headspace. And I just thought that there were moments like that throughout the episode that I thought were really effective in helping illustrate what it can be like when you're remembering things and it's good and your creativity is flowing, but then other times when you're having almost like a trauma response, and things feel like jagged and jarring and things keep coming and there's this momentum that you can't break out of. And it was just fascinating to see the way that the cinematography and the editing kind of created those two modes that Carmy was operating in throughout the episode. And then those different type of camera angles, those different editing styles helped make the episode feel dynamic and interesting, even though we're just essentially spending a few
Mm-hmm.
hours with Carmy alone in the kitchen. So I thought that those editing choices really served multiple purposes and served them really well in this episode.
Yeah, that cinematography is so great. And I love that uh, the flashbacks are disorganized. You know, like there isn't a section that we flash back to a specific period of time, but all of those memories are constantly getting cut and jumbled together. You know, and there's cues that we have of people or moments or seasons that we know of as the character, as a viewer, because we spent time with this character, but they're chaotic and they're juxtaposed together. They kind of like meld together in some ways, and I thought all of that was really, really great because that's how our memories work, where we flash back to sometimes a succession of 5 to 6 memories that were from totally different seasons, but there's something about each of those that's touching on a really vulnerable spot for us about who we believe that we are. And I thought it was really interesting too that a lot of those flashbacks cut to something someone is saying, that those words cut like daggers. And just the power of words and how much those can get seared into our minds and get replayed again and again. So there's some of those flashbacks to some of the things that one of the characters in the fishes episode was saying to Mikey, or some of the things that mean chef would say to Carmy, and how much those have like pierced beyond just like oh, this was a memory, but like no, this is like touching on fundamentally a core belief of who I believe that I am and the value that I have. I think that was really fascinating to me, of like the power of words, and it's often coming back to those same snippets again and again and again that have really like sunk deeper than just a flashing memory that comes and goes. Like no, they often are a recurring one.
Yeah, and how those things continue to affect us. It's so
Yeah,
human.
it is. It really is. It really is. I thought his affirmations journal, I wouldn't even call them affirmations. His slogans, his pillars of,
Non-negotiables.
yeah. I'm like reading them, I'm like, oh my god, Carmy, please, this is not healthy for you. There's like no excuses, or like strive for excellence, and you're like, I don't think this is fascinating to see like what your mind is like meditating on and fixating on, but it is so indicative of his like unhealthy drive for perfection that has come at such a cost for him. And I just want to take that notebook and rip it up and burn it, because those fixations are very revealing of what he's encircling in his mind. But he's done it in such an unhealthy way that I'm just like, please, no more. Don't write these every morning or every couple of hours. Like he's writing a new thing into his notebook, and they're often like repeated again and again too. And I'm like, oh man, these are getting synced into your psyche, and I don't want this for you, Carmy.
At first, I thought one of them said violent collaboration. I was like, oh, Carmy, this is really bad. So I had to like rewind it, and it was actually vibrant collaboration. And
Yep.
I was like, okay, that's better. But it's also funny that he's writing something about collaboration alone.
By himself. Yep.
Like, okay, that's cool. But if you're
Hmm.
going to write that, let's collaborate, shall we?
Yep. Yep.
Just an idea.
There's so many on there too. It's like a list of
So
like
many.
15 items. Like, oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was fascinating. It was really great. Like, uh, we cut to his notebook again and again throughout the episode, and it was like a really great thread line, and also really revealing for where his headspace is at.
Hmm. Yeah. Dude is struggling, which is fair. I mean, he was locked in the walk in for a good long time,
Yep.
just spiraling. So I don't think anybody would be okay after that.
Hmm.
So we're gonna see how he does from here.
Yep. 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 Shout out to the score of this episode. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, man, they
Yeah.
strike again. They hit it out of the park again. It
Yeah.
really fits so well in showcasing that like trance that he's in, this like tunnel vision that he's experiencing with that synth, and just how much he is fixated on his thing right now and cannot break out of it. And so I felt intoxicated by it as well, and kind of like led down the pathway into descending into his headspace through that score. So it really does. It's doing great things for this episode.
They are phenomenal always, and
Yep.
they've done it again here. I don't know how they do it,
I
but
don't know either.
they nailed it again.
So good. So good. Okay, any other big things that we want to mention before we give out some awards, which we'll explain in a hot sec?
Yeah, I have two other big things that I want to touch on. One of them is this episode was very green to me. There was a lot of greenery or
Oh.
plants all
Hmm.
throughout. You see him in the beginning dealing with the flowers in the dining room. Then you see him working with peas a lot. Then there are those
Recipes.
scenes where he's in the garden. And I just thought that that was a really different look than we've seen from the bear. There was this vibrancy and this greenery that we haven't always seen, because in the first season it was a sandwich shop and there was no greens anywhere. There was no garden anywhere, nothing. In the second season, they're building this, so they're not cooking as much, and there's some greenery when you get to see them like putting plates together, but there's not a focus on like florals or foliage or things like that. So then to go to this episode, it just, in addition to the pace being different, it also just looked so different to me, because we're getting to see different environments, we're getting to see different colors of food than we normally see them working with. And so I'm very curious if that is going to continue through this season, and we're going to continue to see these different types of environment and kind of the beauty of food maybe in a different way than we have before.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really fascinating observation. I hadn't really thought about it in terms of like a color tone that feels prominent and resonant throughout each of the scenes throughout this episode, but I really see that. That just the contrast. I mean, if we really zoom out, like the truly the journey that we've gone on, like we start season one of The Bear in this like really chaotic kitchen. Everything's like shades of
Mm-hmm.
gray and brown. There's
Yeah.
ketchup flying everywhere, and now we are in this like beautifully pristine kitchen of like high caliber appliances, I would assume, and this like mid-century modern warm woods in the dining area with these florals. It's such a transformation, and that, if we really zoom out to think back of where we came from, there's been so much that this team has accomplished.
Yeah, it's incredible, just night and day difference.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun to see what this new world kind of looks like in season 3.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up is Marcus,
Yes.
our guy.
Our dude. Sweet
uh,
Marcus. Sweet
Sweet
gentle Marcus.
Marcus. So Marcus is the best, and he is going through hell And every time he was on screen, he's only on screen like a few times,
Nice.
but
Yeah.
every time he popped up on screen, I just wanted to run over and give him a hug. And it's just so sad to watch this incredibly wonderful character
Yeah.
just grieving and just devastated. So it's interesting because he and Carmy are both so low, but for very different reasons.
Hmm.
And so I think that that's another strategic point of contrast, because we know how Carmy and Richie are very different and their trajectories are different. We see the similarities and differences between Sid and Carmy, and now we also get to see Carmy and Marcus, who have very, very different personalities and are at their lowest of lows right now, and get to see their trajectory. So we have the makings of some really good contrast between these characters. Uh, but yeah, just absolutely brokenhearted for Marcus.
Hmm. Yeah, and the show is so smart to just to like a lot of those shots with Marcus were just fixated on his face, side profile, and to see his facial expression. Uh, and that's it. And then we cut away. And I thought just the simplicity of those shots of him outside the hospital room, sitting on a bench, side profile, slow, long, still shot, and then cut away. Like that was honestly like almost emotionally more powerful than had we seen him in the room with his mom and all of that would have also been very emotional. But there's something like powerful in the simplicity of us literally just sitting with him and wondering and imagining all of the thoughts that might be running through his brain and his emotions in that moment outside the room. I thought that was just like such a intentional and smart choice to understand that that honestly carries such a gut punch even without showing all of the rest of it.
Yeah, and then we get that little moment where Sid is leaving him a voicemail,
Yeah,
and
love that.
you can just like her heart is broken for him too. And it's like,
Yeah.
Sid, me too. All of us. Like that voicemail, it's from all of us. Like everybody watching, us too. Ugh,
Yes.
it's
Oh,
so
so
sad.
good. One thing I loved about Sid's voicemail is when she says, uh, like if you need support, I'm here. And also don't feel like you need to answer this at all. Just know that we're supporting you.
Hmm.
I thought that just
Yeah.
like her understanding of what he needed at that moment and kind of the freedom and permission to be like, we're here, but like I don't want to create pressure for you to feel like you have to respond. I know that like that that feeling of being loved and not having the pressure to respond is something that I personally feel incredibly loved in when I'm going through stuff. And so the fact that Sid is intuitive and understanding of what Marcus needs in that moment to say, like, just we're here. I know you're going through a lot. And even just responding might be a lot. And we don't want to make you feel like you have to. I just thought that little detail that Sid understood and communicated to him was really meaningful too.
Ugh, it's so good. It's just
It's great.
perfect.
Yep. 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 Okay. Well, shall I give out some awards? Some TVNS awards?
Yeah, let's do it. First ones of season 3.
Yes, yeah. So if you are new to TVNS, this is a tradition that we love to do when we review the TV shows and episodes that we're discussing. Is we'll end our episode giving out some awards because we love to give out awards. You get an award and you get an award. So we pick three categories. We've used the same categories through season 1 and 2, and now season 3 of The Bear because it just fits. It works so well. And we will each share who we've chosen to be the grand recipient of the awards. So, our first category is Top Chef, and this goes to a character on the show. And we can interpret that however we want of who is Top Chef and why they might have earned this prestigious award for this episode's review. So, Sarah, I'm curious to hear who is getting this award this week.
I would like to give this to Sugar for in the flashback slipping money into Carmy's pocket when he didn't realize it.
Such a slay. I love it.
Right? Like she killed it. It's
Uh,
like, you go, sugar. And incredible.
so good. Yeah, it was really great. Yeah. Especially after he's like, no, I don't want it. I don't want it. And she's like, and here you go. You're going to take it. Thanks. Love you, bro. So good. It was really sweet. I am giving this award to Sid for her grace. She is so understanding and forgiving of Carmy while still also holding her stance and, communicating to him like, yeah, that sucked. And I hope we don't have to ever do that again, but also just the ability for her to continue to hold so much grace and forgiveness for all of the people in her life is always astounding. And feel like we get to see that in this really quiet moment between her and Carmy during this episode. So I loved that little moment.
She even brings him a coffee.
Yeah, man.
Like, wow. She, queen, right there.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't
Mm-hmm.
deserve that coffee, and yet she gives it anyway. Sid is the best.
So good. So good. Okay, the next category is achievement in chaos. So this can go to a moment, a thing, a object, anything. What is causing chaos in this episode? Sarah, what is your choice for this award?
I would like to give this to Carmy for meticulously setting the dining room back together and then kicking a bucket into the kitchen. That contrast, I was like, whoa, agent of
Okay.
chaos right here.
That's so good. Yeah, the outburst. He was so calmly fixing everything beforehand, just couldn't hold it in. Just couldn't hold it in. I am giving this award to Carmy's entire headspace at this moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. As we've discussed at length in the previous part of this conversation. Okay. The next category is spiciest line. So this is given to someone for delivering a zinger of a line of dialogue. Sarah, who's getting this award this week?
I would like to give it to the mean New York City chef played by Joel McHale, who says, "You basically made nachos."
Yeah. So good. Yeah. And it's this like beautiful dish that honestly has like three
Right?
drops of sauce, and you're like, okay, I mean, that looked great to me, but the
Right.
craft, it wasn't perfect.
Also, why are we dropping shade on nachos?
Right?
Nachos are delightful and delicious. Come
Mm-hmm.
on, New York City chef. Don't be such a jerk.
Yeah, but he does give nacho hater vibes, honestly.
He does. He does. Which is a shame. Maybe that's why he's so angry all the time,
He
is
hasn't had
because he
enough
hates
nachos.
nachos.
That's right. We figured it out.
Okay. Nailed it.
I'm giving this award to Stevie. It's actually not a line of dialogue, but him spraying air freshener while Carmy is asleep, I just made me
Yes.
giggle. It was really great.
Oh, it's so good. Those
The
little
ultimate
moments
diss.
when he enters, they're just perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 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 And I love that it has its own little story arc. We start out with like, okay, Carmy just comes home late and like falls into bed. And Carmy comes late, he's asleep, and Stevie is like putting him to bed, putting the covers over him. And then he's spraying air freshener while Carmy sleeps. It's a whole story in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Yep, he sure does. And
Mm-hmm.
it's so funny because it's a mix of humor and also tenderness.
Mm-hmm.
After a long day at work and Carmy is passed out and Stevie is taking his shoes off, he's tucking him in. Like, it's so sweet and tender. But then he's like, "Oh, you smell like a donkey." Like, it's so good. This mix of tender and just cutting at the same time is great.
Yep. Yep. It's so good. It's so good. All right. Well, our journey of season 3 has begun. So, as we look ahead, what are you looking forward to? What do you hope to see?
I mean, we've already talked about quite a bit of it, but just where's Carmy going to go next? And like, how is he going to get there? And
Yep.
how is he going to respond to all of these other people in his life? I really want to know more about that kitchen that he was at with the garden.
Yeah.
And it might just be me like projecting onto Carmy, but it seemed like he was happy there.
Yep.
And so I want to know more about that space, because when we had flashed back there, I was like, Carmy, why did you leave? Like, if you were happy there and having a good time, like what's going on? Can we go back there? Can we bring some of that here? Like, what's going on? So I want to see
Mm,
more of that environment. Um, and then, like we talked about, just Marcus, what is going to happen with him? How is he going to process through this immense, crushing loss that he is walking through? And then how
mhm,
is everybody going to come around to support him in that?
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's a whole journey and trajectory for Marcus for sure in this episode. Um, I have a couple things jotted down here. First one is basically like we at a low right now, so we can only go up from here. I'm intrigued to see what that journey is going to look like for Carmy. There's a moment where he says, Sid says you should really call, and he's like, or I think he says like I should really call her, and she's like, no, I meant Richie. So a lot of words were shared with Claire in the finale, and I think it'll be fascinating to see how he continues to figure out how to find reconciliation, still allow for love in his life, but maybe part of how he will grow to figure out a more mature way to deal with all of the many balls that he has up in the air of his life. I think this episode was so character focused that I'm intrigued to see like what will this team come together and rally around over the course of the season. As we've talked about in the past, oftentimes there's this mission, there's this goal that the team's working towards, and in pursuit of that goal, there's these character moments that emerge through the stressors, through the wins, and I'm intrigued to see what this team's going to tackle next. They've covered and gotten through Friends and Family Night, and I'm assuming the next thing will be the opening. So I'm just intrigued, like what will the team rally around? And I want to see how everyone else is doing. That was my last thing. There's all of these open thread lines and big things that happen in the finale that I could just want to visit all of our friends and see what's up. Like Sid, how is Sid doing? She had a whole emotional journey in the finale of season 2, and I feel like we get a little bit of her, but it's often in relation to Carmy and kind of this episode being focused on Carmy. So how's Sid doing? Where's her headspace at? What's she thinking about? I just want to do that, but with all of our characters. So I just want to visit everyone.
Yes, because we see like Tina for a hot second in a flashback. We
Yeah.
see Ibra in a hot second for a flashback. We don't
Yep.
even see Fack. We just see his tool belt,
Yep.
So I don't think we see Sweeps either.
Nope.
So yeah, we need to check in with
Sugar.
all of our friends.
Yeah.
And I am curious if season 3 is going to be structured more like season 2, and if we'll get some of
Mm-hmm.
these uh, maybe more narrow in scoped episodes like this first one is, where it's primarily focused on Carmy. So are we going to get another Sydney episode, another Marcus episode, another Richie episode? How
Yeah.
is this going to be structured, so that we can take maybe some deep dives into these characters too?
Yep. Yep. Agreed. Especially some of the characters that we've been invested in, but haven't been like the center of an episode, like a Tina or an Ibra. I wonder how they will juggle and balance all of that. There's so many characters that we're emotionally invested in, and there's only so much time. So them figuring out to use their run times will be fascinating to see what choices they make. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we will be here for all of them.
We will indeed. We will indeed. Our journey has just begun for season 3. So, this is a review of episode 1. You can find it available to stream on Hulu. Thank you for listening to today's episode of TV and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. So everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today as we continued our journey through The Bear Season 3. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about episode 1 of this new season. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at TVNS Pod, or you can email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back next week to discuss episode 2. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again very soon.